The Cincinnati Bengals remain in must-win mode for their trip to Cleveland to start their series with the Battle of Ohio 2024. Can they get the Cleveland monkey off their back? Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Bengals, your daily Cincinnati Bengals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What up, Bengals fans, and welcome to another episode of the Locked On Bengals podcast. I'm your host, Jake Liscow. He's your host, James Rapien. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, covering your team every day. James, of course, also doing his thing at Bengals Talk SI, covering the team every day. And we're on YouTube. We're everywhere you get your podcast. So if you're new to the show, you're looking for a consistent source of Bengals news and analysis, you're in the right place. And you can find us on Twitter, of course, with the handles on YouTube that you can see on the screen, or at Jake Liscow, at James Rapien. And you'll see all of the various things that we are publishing with thoughts about the Bengals, in addition to what we talk about here on Locked On Bengals. If you're new to the show, you also probably haven't heard us talk about the Locked On Bengals Insider Group. If you want text from us and the opportunity to text us back, a direct line, a little bit more communication, you can check that out at joinsubtext.com/LockedOnBengals. There's a 2-week free trial there you can check out as well. As we dive in today's preview against the Cleveland Browns here in Week 7, James, for the Cincinnati Bengals is brought to the people by FanDuel, where they can place a $5 bet and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. They can get started, you, the listener, at FanDuel.com. James, big game, and they're all going to be like this for the foreseeable future. We're going to be talking about a lot of must-wins for this team until they're out of playoff contention or squarely in playoff contention, and that remains true this week.
No doubt. It's a huge game because they need their first AFC win. They need their first AFC North win. They need to win in Cleveland for the first time since Marvin Lewis was at least had decent job security. Decent, not perfect. Like, think about that. When since Joe Mixon's rookie season. Let's do it that way. Let's talk about it like that, right? Like, that feels like ages ago. So they haven't won in Cleveland since then. And so you need to get this game. And with all of the talk, and one of the offseason narratives, and I think to a certain degree it was true, but what was really annoying was, man, this team just isn't built to win the division. When they had won back-to-back division titles. Like last December, people were saying that, and they had back-to-back division titles and their quarterback was hurt. And yet, I get it. Like, you can be built a little better to win the division, to compete, to be more physical in the trenches, all of those things. And so hopefully they are. Hopefully Amarius Mims and Orlando Brown Jr. are able to hold up, because they'll be tasked with dealing with Myles Garrett the most, even though he will move around. I think the run game, will they be able to average 4.6 yards per carry, which they've done through 6 weeks? Will they? There's a lot of questions about that. Will the tight ends and the 12 personnel stuff help them? There's a lot of questions, but regardless, Jake, to your point, they have to win, and we'll break down the path and all of those things, but finding a way to win, getting to 3-4, 1-1 in the division, your first AFC win, because you're 0-3 in the AFC right now, you got to find a way to get one. And they have a shot on Sunday to do so.
The Bengals didn't get their first AFC win in 2023 until Week 9 against the Buffalo Bills. They didn't get their first AFC North win, obviously, until Week 18 with the Cleveland Browns visiting Cincinnati with deep backups playing, Jake Browning playing quarterback, obviously, in that game. They can't really deal with that kind of repeat of last year. They're already repeating some worrisome trends from last year, and in some ways worse trends from last year. Their 2 wins are against NFC opponents. They're a win behind their pace from 2023, and they're still trying to catch up. They're around the point, though, where they started turning it around in 2023. And while Zach Taylor, Joe Burrow, et cetera, constantly tell us that they don't compare the current year's team to the previous year's team, the number of times this question has come up for either of those guys, there are trends that are similar year over year, which is why the questions are brought up in the first place. Around this time last year is around when we started to see them have a convincing win, the 14-point win over the Arizona Cardinals in Week 5, They scratch one out against the Seattle Seahawks in week 6. They catch their bye, then they get hot and look like a great team against the San Francisco 49ers and Buffalo Bills. If they look like a great team this week against the Cleveland Browns, and they can look like a great team next week to get to 4-4, then you might be feeling against the Philadelphia Eagles. Then you might be feeling like, okay, they're back where they need to be and they have the momentum they need. But that starts this week in a place where they haven't had success. And the Cleveland defensive line plays so much better. You might go look at Myles Garrett's productivity this year. And against Dallas in week 1, he has 3 hurries and 3 pressures and a sack. Against the Giants in week 3, 9 pressures. And the Bengals just saw that Giants team. The commonalities in those games is that the Browns are at home. And the Browns defensive line playing at home versus playing on the road where they've played their last 3 games is a significantly different unit when they have the advantage of crowd noise and silent counts to time up getting off the ball. So that is something that the Bengals will have to deal with this week. I think when we're thinking about how the Bengals win this game, I keep coming back to Myles Garrett over and over and over. There are other players and matchups and scheme-based things that the Bengals will have to contend with this week. But it's hard for me to get past Myles Garrett as number 1A and 1B for things to deal with for this team to come out on top this week.
Yeah, I agree. And I think the path to that is starting so fast. Like, find a way to and the crowd's going to be fired up still because Cleveland they will be fired up. They will find a way, even if they do boo Deshaun Watson pregame. But if you can score first and force a 3 and out, instant boos, probably. Go score again. You want to neutralize Myles Garrett, play with a lead, play ahead of the chains, be able to be efficient on offense. Like I think that we've talked about the offense a lot, and it's especially from weeks 3 to 5. It's like, man, this defense, what about this defense? And look, this defense needs to continue to take steps forward. But to me, this is a game that the offense can really set up the defense and can kind of set the table to where they don't have to chase. Now, the defense has to show up early for them to get off to a good start. But I think that's the key. When you look at all these games, when the Bengals, they lose 41-16 here at Paycor, just days after Odell Beckham Jr. was released. What happened? Joe Burrow goes downfield, throws a pick 6 to Denzel Ward. They tied it 7-7, but if you don't throw that pick 6 and you score there, it just feels different. That their last 2 blowout losses in Cleveland, same thing. You just get off to a slow start and you're like, all right, well, are they going to be able to turn it on? Are they going to be able to turn it on? And then Myles Garrett can tee off because Joe Burrow's dropping back a ton. And so how do they go hand in hand? If you're playing with a lead, well, then you're not forced to essentially let Myles Garrett pin his ears back and be predictable. And so hopefully the Bengals can do that, because we've seen that when they're not dealing with opponents like Myles Garrett when it comes to fast starts. If you get off to a fast start against this Browns team, I think it's just going to feel different, both vibe in the stadium and what Myles Garrett can and can't do.
A big week for vibes and momentum is what I'm hearing.
It is.
James.
It is. I mean, if you talk to people, I mean, we had Jeff on yesterday.
Yeah.
We're talking about booing the starting quarterback, delaying the plans, and the stadium stuff was announced on Thursday. They've had that done, but the vibes in Cleveland have been so bad that they didn't want to release it. And so, like, that's a thing, by the way. Like, that's a very real thing. And I'm sure it was met with that on Thursday when the stadium stuff gets announced. Like, get off to a good start, get that crowd out of the game or into the booing number 4 game, and go put Jameis Winston in. Like, that's what you want to hear early. And I think the offense has as big of a chance to do that as anything. Go score 14 on your first 2 possessions and see how the Browns respond on offense.
We've talked a little bit this week about the bones of this game potentially looking similar to the structure, from a skeletal structure, to continue the analogy of the New York Giants game, where there's a bad offense, some skilled players in the trenches, some skilled players on the defensive side of the ball for the Bengals opponent, and the Bengals needing to take advantage of that. You talk about game script a lot too. Those things often do go hand in hand. I want to continue with some expectations around this Bengals offense and Bengals defense for this game and the things that we're looking to see them do this week coming up next.
Today's show is brought to you by Arena Club. Arena Club is where you need to go right now, because most of us that like collecting cards, well, you're not going to be able to land that Luka Doncic card that you're looking for, that Ellie De La Cruz or Patrick Mahomes or Joe Burrow rookie. It's just not in the cards. But if you love collecting, you got to get slab packs from arenaclub.com. An Arena Club slab pack drop is the only repack that provides real value, a complete value of possible cards, and a clear hit rate for each one. The Arena Club grading process is accurate, fast, and transparent, with a full grade rationale provided, an explanation of how your card was scored. So right now, take advantage by getting a slab pack, and you can get 10% off your first slab pack or card purchase by going to arenaclub.com/lockedonnfl and use code lockedonnfl. Again, that's arenaclub.com/lockedonnfl, code lockedonnfl for 10% off your first purchase. Get all of the trading cards you want today. Today's show is also brought to you by PrizePicks. PrizePicks is the app you need because it's daily fantasy the way it should be. That's right. Daily fantasy where you're not having to deal with thousands of other players. It's you versus the PrizePicks projection. So maybe you think Joe Burrow is going to throw for more than his number of passing yards from a projection standpoint that is on the PrizePicks app. Boom. You combine that with maybe the more than for Jamar Chase. We'll be positive here. Joe Burrow more than passing yards, Jamar Chase more than receiving yards. Put those together, you can win up to 100 times your cash with PrizePicks. It is that easy. Sign up today, and you're going to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's it. So all you have to do, go in the App Store and download the app today. Use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, code LOCKEDONNFL in the PrizePicks app. PrizePicks, run your game.
We had high expectations for the Cincinnati Bengals offense against the New York Giants. We were still concerned about the Cincinnati Bengals defense going into that game against the New York Giants. Those things are both still true. That's the thing. We didn't get the high-flying performance from the Bengals offense against the Giants. We didn't get the letdown performance from the Bengals defense against the New York Giants. Despite that, I'm looking for the offense to have a bounce-back week. I'm looking for the defense to continue its performance against the Giants and build on that against another bad offense. Because one of the things we've talked about is that the Bengals have played some of the better offenses in the NFL this year. Kansas City Chiefs and Washington Commanders and Baltimore Ravens, all really good offenses this year by most metrics. The Giants, not one of those. The Browns, not one of those. So when we're talking about what we're looking for from this team in this game, just to stay on the topic of the offense before we transition to the defense, in terms of things that would help me to buy back into this team, it's having a compelling performance on both sides of the ball, playing that complete game that we haven't seen from them this year, instead of scratching and clawing to put things together. And we're still in a position where beggars can't be choosers about the way they win, and just winning the game is still the most important thing. But if they want to take another step and start to get me, at least, to buy back in, and I'm sure many people listening, it would be more of a complete performance where, yeah, they get to 30 on offense and they continue their strong stretch of play that they showed against the Giants, against another bad offense that does get Nick Chubb back, but just lost their best skill player to date this year in Amari Cooper, that has been through trials and tribulations, that has a sketchy offensive line. Get everything together this week. Let's not have the laundry list of plays we're pointing to where we're saying, missed opportunity here, a drop there, a bad penalty there. And let's just minimize that and have more of the dominant feeling that we were hoping to see from this team in some of these early games this year.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think that's when I laid out the entire offense fast start part. If you're Lou Anarumo, if you're this defense, it's this. It's smother them. It's literally be all over them. They lost Amari Cooper this week. Their quarterback has been awful and is thin-skinned and is ready to get booed out of the damn building. So make it happen, right? Because it can go one of two ways here. You can either give them some momentum early, or you can just completely crush them early, and the crowd's going to get restless, and he could press and make a bad decision or two. Or they're banking on Thrash, the rookie, to be their third receiver now. Maybe he runs a wrong route or is a step slow, or Watson's just a step fast, or whatever the case is from a timing perspective. Like, take advantage of that stuff by making them press. And so getting out fast, not letting Nick Chubb feel like pre-injury Nick Chubb in his first couple runs is huge. Because if he, let's say he averages like 4.3 a carry, that's enough to get him into a rhythm, get the offense into a rhythm a bit, potentially. And you just don't want that, especially early in this game. And I do think at some point, Jake, the Sheldon Rankins game from a pass rush standpoint, an impact play, tackle for a loss standpoint, because maybe it's against the run. I'm sure the Browns want to run it a lot and get the ball out of Deshaun Watson's hands as much as possible. It's going to happen. I believe in Sheldon Rankins. And so maybe this is the week. It's BJ Hill last week. Maybe it's Sheldon Rankins this week, where he can kind of not control the game. I think that's unreasonable, but make some impact plays in the backfield to give the Bengals the momentum they need. Because if they can do that, then I think it would go a long way. Because like I said, it's teetering in Cleveland right now. And number 4, I mean, think about it. Think about the national reaction to Kevin Stefanski saying Deshaun Watson has given them the best chance to win. Yeah. Imagine what it's like locally, right? I mean, so take advantage of that. Use it to your advantage by getting off to a fast start defensively. It's a theme that I'm really hammering this week, because it could go one of two ways. If you let the Browns go up 10-0, then that whole stadium's going to be confident, and it's going to feel like it's felt in Cleveland in recent years. Or you can get up, get some momentum, and then I think it's going to be a pretty unique feeling that the Bengals haven't experienced in Cleveland in quite some time.
I'll just add to that, they'll still have to finish the game. They've had some fast starts this year, at least on one side of the ball. Like, you're right, but sure. We just spent last week talking about finishing games too. And they managed to do it against the Giants, but it was tenuous. It was touch and go. They were walking a tightrope and very nearly fell off at the end of the
fumble.
Game.
Thank goodness there's an out of bounds line.
Yeah. But you're talking about Sheldon Rankins. I'm saying, why not both? Get Sheldon Rankins his big splashy game, his first big splashy game as a Bengal, but also let's see if BJ Hill can turn back another performance like last week. The interior of this Browns offensive line, and none of this offensive line is playing well right now, but the interior, I mean, I like Trey Hendrickson against Jedrick Wills. The interior of this Browns offensive line, Joel Bitonio not playing like the Joel Bitonio you're thinking of. Michael Dunn playing for the Browns. Zach Zinter, some young players in there giving up a lot of pressures, especially against the Eagles last week. I'm not saying the Bengals have the Eagles defensive line. If there's a strength of the Eagles team, it is probably still the pass rush. And we'll get more into that when the Bengals play the Eagles next week. But take advantage of these questionable pass protectors, especially on the interior. If you're talking about that Bengals defensive interior, and that would go a long way as well. But yeah, I mean, I can agree with your idea of a fast start here. We just talk about it a lot. And while it's true, and game script is monumental against the Browns especially, this year the difference is where in past years we had a lot of confidence in their ability to finish games. I'm not there right now. And so, yeah, it's start fast, but it's still like play a complete game and finish the game too.
Yeah, I get it. I do. I think that things are so rocky up there in Cleveland that if you start fast, then it just kind of unravels for them.
Yeah. You have to make them feel that, right? Like,
no doubt.
Keep them in their hole, keep them down. Yep. They're going to try to get themselves, pull themselves out of the trough they're in, but just push their heads right back down in.
Yeah, Jerry Jeudy's like, oh, well, I'm a number 1. I was that 18th pick or whatever. Right? You know, like
they're getting Nick Chubb back. David and
their slot receiver thinks that he's a second round pick with the Jets. He's like, oh, we're fine without Amari Cooper. James Thrash is like, I'm great. I can be the third receiver. Like David and Njoku, Nick Chubb, like they're all probably confident. Now, are they confident in Watson? Is Watson confident? I would say body language wise, clearly not. So keep them there. And to your point, push them down another rung. And if you do that, and I think the offense can do that as much as the defense, then let's see how they respond. Because then we might not even be talking about finishing the game, which would be quite nice.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's necessarily realistic, and we can get to that coming up next as far as what I think and how I think this game is going to go. There are still certainly more scenarios and things we have to discuss, including my prediction. We will do that coming up next.
This episode of Locked On Bengals is sponsored by FanDuel, where you can right now get $200 in bonus bets with your first $5 bet. And if you've not used FanDuel before, it's America's #1 sportsbook for a reason. Not only do they have your garden variety of sports betting options, they also have tons of props available, and I love to browse the props before the game. That's a fun thing for me to do. Not only do they have all the betting options, but they also will give you stats, live play-by-play, and so much more at the same place you're placing your bets. So you don't have to have several tabs open. You don't need to be scrolling between different windows on your phone or on your computer or wherever you're dealing with your bets. This week, you can get in on a first touchdown score. Maybe you think you like that Jamar Chase plus 550 as a first touchdown score in this game. That is the most likely first touchdown scorer according to FanDuel this week. Or maybe you think Nick Chubb in his return or Chase Brown, who's been piling on touchdowns lately, are better options. Those are all there for you to pick from with FanDuel. And again, you get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed with your first $5 bet. That's only with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook at FanDuel.com.
My prediction coming up in just a few minutes, Jake. All right, so we've talked about fast starts. We've talked about the idea that they need to finish. Hopefully it doesn't come to that, but it certainly could.
I mean,
I don't know
that
about
that could be finishing in like the third quarter.
No
that
doubt.
Could be getting to 31-7 in the third quarter. It's
No
just
doubt.
not letting them back in the game if you get to that point. You know what I mean?
Which, man, again, this is my point, is just I think listening to us, this is your first episode, you're like, man, you think the Bengals are just going to roll the Browns. I don't. I still think that this is going to be a dogfight. Like, I still think it's going to feel uncomfortable. I still think that the Bengals have enough flaws and there's enough talent on that Browns defense where it's like, I don't think you're going to feel great about it. And it's still going to be one of these physical AFC North, just blah kind of games, much like Sunday night was against the Giants. Like, I do think that there's similarities that are going to translate when we're doing our post-game show at 4:30, 5 o'clock on Sunday afternoon.
Yeah, maybe we've gotten too far into the show for people to hear this message at this point, but it's not necessarily the things we're talking about are things that we think are necessarily going to happen. We're painting a path to victory and a path to a best case scenario, really, so far in this show. We're talking about all these reasons that the Bengals, if they're the team that we thought they were in the preseason, that they've proven not to be so far this year, if they're going to get back to that status, these are things that team would do to a foundering and floundering Cleveland Browns team that can't find its way out of any of its own problems that are of its own design and just had to trade their most productive player on offense. But as you said, James, this could still be a struggle. Nick Chubb coming back is a overwhelming positive for the Cleveland Browns in this game if they want to run their offense through Nick Chubb again. That is something that has given the Bengals plenty of issues over the years. Different offensive line coach at this point in Cleveland, different offensive line personnel, not the same unit there as it was in the heyday of Nick Chubb, but Nick Chubb could still be Nick Chubb. We don't really know yet. We might find out on Sunday. David Njoku was very productive for the Browns in his return from injury last week against the Eagles. Jerry Jeudy got that extension. These guys, and Elijah Moore was a player that we really were thinking was a good addition for the Browns last year.
Elijah Moore. I keep forgetting his name. I don't know why I always do. Loved him pre-draft. Yeah.
Hasn't really worked out that way. A lot of that goes back to the quarterback. But at any given point, this team that has had your number could still have your number. And so that's why we're talking about these ways for the Bengals to overcome that. And that doesn't even mention, Myles Garrett, as we talked about at the beginning of the show, JOK at the second level. Maybe this is a Zadarius Smith game going against the rookie on the other side. It's going to be a lot of Zadarius Smith and Amarius Mims this week. The Browns are going to play a lot of man, so it's going to be on these Bengals receivers, T. Higgins, Jamar Chase, Andre Yosavash, to beat that man coverage when they get those opportunities, if they still get that. And that's something the Browns have been able to successfully challenge the Bengals with in the last couple of years. And especially last year, Joe Burrow not healthy, obviously, for week one, but Jim Schwartz giving the Bengals plenty of issues in that game. And so hasn't really been the case for that team this year. Everything around that team is down this year, but the Bengals have to keep them there or we're going to have some very unpleasant conversations after the game Sunday. But it doesn't have to go that way. It's just a monkey on their back and a big opportunity to show that they no longer are under that weight in Cleveland.
Yeah. I think go show that this offense is versatile enough to go win a game that, Jamar might be dealing with Denzel a lot and T might be locked up a lot. Not that I don't think either one can be guarded like that and locked up and just shut down. I don't. But I also think that clearly when you mix in this pass rush and these DBs, that they've just had the Bengals number, and the numbers speak for themselves there. So is this an Eric All game? Does Mike Gesicki emerge? Andre Yosevich, we've seen him make some clutch plays and red zone plays. Is this the game where he has 9 catches and just really goes off and helps move the chains? Is this the running back game where Zach Moss has 7 catches out of the backfield and both running backs have huge production out of the backfield? Maybe that's it. Or, whether it's Brown Moss, whether it's Eric All and Gesicki, or a mixture there. But find the solution. Because if we're talking now about this offense and them not getting to, let's say they don't get to 20, well, then that's an issue. They should be able to go put 20 or more on this Browns defense. I feel confident in saying that, regardless of where the game is played. And so we'll see if they can do that. But I am intrigued by the offense to see if they can bounce back after last week, which was kind of ugly, similar play style on paper. And so can they adjust, make the right adjustments, get off to a hot start, be productive, and win in the AFC North. And man, what a win it would be. If they could get to 3-4, then you're going to start to look at that AFC North. The Ravens play on Monday night, but it's going to feel a little tighter. It is.
Yeah. And an opportunity to continue stacking wins into the second game against the Ravens, which is going to be a very difficult Thursday night AFC North road game. Just going to highlight a couple other things here before we get to your prediction, James. You mentioned a bunch of non-T. Higgins and Jamar Chase options to emerge for this offense. How about just getting those guys in the slot, where Greg Newsome has not been great for the Browns this year? Or just going after Martin Emerson, who's had his struggles after a really good rookie year, has been way down this year and is getting beat quite a bit. Emerson has had a good matchup against the Bengals, has played well against the Bengals, as has JOK in the past. But if you just need to target somebody who isn't Denzel Ward, maybe go after the safeties, where they maybe are getting Grant Delpit back this week, but are still down a guy at safety. There are a lot of defenses or a lot of holes in this defense that the Bengals can exploit. And it'll be interesting to see how they go about doing it. Last thing, James, before your prediction is be ready for Myles Garrett to try to jump the long snapper on any field goal tries. That is certainly a trend, I think, emerging in the NFL. But with that said, James, we've talked about how this game could go for us to feel really good about it. We've talked about some of the ways this could go off the rails and some of the reasons the monkey is on the Bengals back in the first place. And I know I keep saying that, but it's true. How do you see this game going?
Well, one other thing I want to mention, and I'll get to the prediction, is the Ryan Rico, Tyson Anderson connection. Big. The other special teams part of this. Winning that, having a Ryan Rico, Brad Robbins, I talked to him about it. He hated that game. That was one of the many ugly parts of that week 1 game last year. The weather shouldn't be what it was last year, but you also expect it to be windy on that lakefront. So Ryan Rico, eyes on him to continue to do what he's done. That being said, I think that this is one of those AFC North slow-moving games, but the Bengals are going to get off to a better start. I don't think they'll do what I said, which is score 14 points on their first 2 possessions. Maybe they do, but I do think you look up and it's 10-3 at the end of the first quarter. And then at halftime, Bengals. And then at halftime, maybe it's 13-3. And they just can kind of control this game. I expect them to control this game. I think that's fair to say and to expect, and I'll be disappointed if they don't. I'm going to take the Bengals 23-13. I don't think it's a blowout by any stretch. But again, I think that they should go up there, be able to control things a bit, limit the big splash plays from Myles Garrett. And if they have to punt a couple times, fine, they have to punt. The defense will hold up its end of the bargain. So I'll take the Bengals 23-20.
The Browns aren't that physical.
Or 23-13. 23-13, excuse me. Jesus, I hope it's not 23-20. That's another nail biter. Yeah. I don't want any more nail biters. 23-13.
The Browns this year have not been that physical team in the trenches that has given the Bengals so many issues in the past. This is a game where you could be talking about missing DJ Reader this week if it was that kind of Browns offensive front, or you could be talking about needing the Bengals offensive front to play more physical against a bullying pass rush from the Cleveland Browns. But outside of Myles Garrett, they still have a lot of the guys who are just not playing at that level this year. And so that should give the Bengals a chance to do what you're talking about and control the game. I hope they get to 27. 27-13 would feel a lot better to me than 23-13. I know it's not a huge difference. It's only 4 points. But that's finishing one drive instead of kicking a field goal somewhere. I'd feel better about that personally.
So it was an opening. Let's see. Hold on. Bengals 2005 results. Was it 05? Yeah, they beat the Browns 27-13 to start the 2005 season. So there you go. How about that?
Let's do that game. 2005 was a good year until it wasn't.
Oh, it was a great year. It was a really fun year. And guess what? The game in Cleveland.
There you go. Run that back. Almost 20 years later.
DJ, play that.
That's going to do it for this episode of the Locked On Bengals podcast. We'll be back with you after the game with post-game takeaways here on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Until then, thanks for listening to this episode of the Locked On Bengals podcast. Hoo day, and have a good one.